Episode number 89, Ironman Muncie 70.3 with Anastasia McKay. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in there for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with my friend and returning guest Anastasia about her recent race at Ironman Muncie 70.3 in Indiana, where she had a time of 5 hours, 8 minutes, and 26 seconds. This race took place on Saturday, July 14th, 2018, and the temperature on race day was 68 and rose to 90. This was a non-wetsuit legal swim with a very steamy water of 83 degrees. Welcome back to the show, Anastasia. I look forward to hearing about your race experience in Indiana.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. So what made you want to do this race?
I came up to this race as a farewell race, planning on having a party like last year with some friends. I'm moving next week, and it would my last chance for a race in the area.
Okay. So how's your training coming into this race? I know you just did Santa Rosa earlier this year.
So just continued strong and steady. It wasn't like much changed from Ironman training to the half Ironman training other than added more intensity.
Okay. And you're still using the same coach, right?
That's correct. Adam Zuko with Superfly Coaching.
Okay. Now, as far as your training looks like, what was your longest swim, bike, and runs going into this race?
The swims, I honestly don't know because typically I would swim 2 to 3 times a week. About 3,500 to 4,500 meters. And that was pretty consistent after Ironman. My bike rides were still at 5 hours. I had done 5-hour rides, the week before the race, both 2 weeks before the race. So, last weekend and the weekend before. Runs had dialed down a bit. I don't know if I hit 2 hours on a run. I might have had a 2-hour run. But the run was noticeably shorter than compared to Ironman training. Not typically much more than an hour and 40 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay. Now, did you do a lot of bricks in training going into this race?
There were bricks. Typically on Saturday, there would be a short run afterwards. Maybe once a week, there would be a 15 or 20-minute run just to get the legs after a bike ride. But there was no triple bricks or not anything really changed from the Ironman training.
Okay. Now, as far as your strength training goes, were you still incorporating your strength training into what you're doing?
I had a couple days of strength, but not a whole lot since we've reached the race season. Between Ironman Santa Rosa and this 70.3, I did have an Olympic in there. And so I think I also completed a 10-miler time trial. So I've had a couple other minor races and not really a whole lot of strength training when doing the other races or events.
Okay. What was your most hours that you trained in 1 week going into this race?
I think it was still over 20. I still think I was somewhere between 20 and 21 hours. I don't pay a whole lot of attention. I just try to do what's in the training peaks. But it was a lot longer than I was expecting to train coming off Ironman and going into a half.
Right. Now, were you looking at wanting to get a certain amount of intensity every week, or were you looking at getting some of the easier stuff in the week?
There was intensity mixed throughout. So there was intensity built into the week, and there was also easier recovery stuff put in the week. I'm still training for Ironman Arizona this fall, so I still think we're maintaining kind of a lot of the endurance and stuff.
Okay. Were you wanting to get a certain amount of easy stuff every week as far as your recovery goes, like a day off every week?
No, I've had very few days off. Typically, I've been tired. I've been really training hard. And coming up before the race, I've been working with the coach saying, dude, I'm just tired. I need some more time. I might have had maybe 1 or 2 days off since Ironman Santa Rosa.
Wow. So it's more just easier workouts rather than complete days off.
Yeah, kind of like complete zone 1 where, I might be spinning on the bike for an hour at 60 watts. and just trying to do high cadence work on the bike, or I might go for a ridiculously slow run where like maybe running a 12 or 13-minute mile, but just working on cadence and working on learning how to run slow at a low intensity just to get blood flowing to help recover.
Okay, so whenever you look at cadence on the run, what are you looking for?
So I've been always targeting trying to get a cadence up to 180, at least greater than 176. A few months ago, I was really in the 160s and with a much lower cadence. And so I'm just focusing on getting my feet moving, coming off the ground. So I'm not having so much time with my feet on the ground.
Okay. So you're wanting to hit about 90 or so?
Correct.
Okay. Now, are you wanting to count both feet or just one foot?
So I have a power meter. I have a little Stride foot pod that does power meter and cadence, and my heart rate monitor also tracks cadence. And so mine shows 180. And so I don't really count as much as I rely on my equipment because I can't do math when I'm exercising very well.
Me either.
But so I'm looking at 180 or at least greater than 176.
Okay. Now, whenever you're outside working out, are you using a road ID?
I do. I have a road ID.
Good. Now, whenever we look at this training going into this race, what specific workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to go into this race prepared?
Well, I came off the Ironman, so I knew I had endurance, and I knew that I would be able to get through 70.3. In terms of running, not much has changed. I know I've had good intensity, and I've been doing more training in some of the heat in the outside environment. So I knew that I could handle running when it's hot, because I've been running outside at times at 5 p.m, and it's been very hot. I've had some long cycling rides with high intensity built in. So for example, having a 5-hour ride with doing 10 by 12 minutes in zone 4 on a couple minutes rest, or having a couple 45-minute intervals at your goal race pace for, perceived effort for race pace. And doing that, still training inside, because I train mostly inside, it was still incredibly hot. And it was also incredibly hot indoors, since the place I'm renting doesn't really have air conditioning. And so I got used to doing that when it was incredibly hot. And I got used to drinking lots of fluids and lots of calories. And so when you're doing 5 hours biking every Saturday, you're like, gosh, 56 miles is going to be a piece of cake.
That makes sense. When did you start traveling to this race?
So I drove up Friday morning for the race on Saturday. It's about a 3.5 hour drive. So I got up at my normal time, which is like 4:40 in the morning, had my normal wake up coffee, got in the car, drove directly to the venue, got to the venue around 9:30, did a brick, checked in, went to the athlete briefing, and then went straight to the hotel.
Wow, that's a busy day.
Oh, we got more in because I had a teammate up there, and to get out of the heat and just to relax, we went to the IMAX theater and saw a movie just to chill out before the race, and then met up with the team for dinner. Wow. So it was more hectic than I normally have the day before a race, but the day went by very quickly. So
do you always like it to be so hustle and bustle the day before a race?
No, I prefer things being low key. This is the first time I went to a movie before a race, and I can say that was actually a really good idea. The IMAX theater had reclining seats. It was nice and air conditioned, and it just let your mind relax, and you went and had a good time. And having dinner with some teammates and friends, I do think that in the big picture, that's a lot more relaxing than being in a hotel room by yourself where all you can do is think about the race. The bike check-in was optional on Saturday, and I did not check my bike in because I did not want to wait 20 minutes in the sun for bike check-in to open. So I brought my bike back to the hotel room. I got done with dinner, and the last thing I did before bed was get everything ready for the next morning. And it ended up working out pretty well. I didn't have too much idle time where all I would be doing is thinking or worrying, or I kept busy enough that I didn't have too much time on my hands.
Right. Now, you say that was optional on Saturday for the bike check-in.
I guess I should say Friday. It's a Saturday race. I keep on forgetting because I'm so used to racing on Sunday.
Right.
On Friday.
Yeah, that confused me because I was like, wait a second. Here I am, July 14th, looking at the website here with the results, July 14th. And then I was like, okay, maybe something is a little off here. So, yeah.
I checked my bike in the morning of the race.
Okay, gotcha.
I did not check my bike the day before. I waited until race.
Gotcha. Okay. So you bring your bike in the morning of the race. Got it. All right. So the day before the race, what are you trying to get in as far as nutrition-wise to help prepare you for the race?
I didn't really have a good nutrition thing. I went and I had a pizza for lunch.
Okay.
It was a chicken bruschetta pizza at the bar right by the hotel, so that was pretty good. And then we had a team dinner at Chili's, and it was amazing. They had a pretty good menu option, and I had a side salad along with a chicken breast, and I had French fries, and they allowed you to substitute whatever sides that you wanted to substitute, so I could. Which was really great. I didn't have to have beans and rice, which I didn't want. And instead, I just had some starchy potatoes.
Okay. Now, did you get in bed at a certain time to prepare you for the race the next day?
I think I was in bed between 8 and 8:30, which is the normal time I go to bed.
Okay. And you wake up at what time?
For this race, I actually got up early. I got up about 3 o'clock in the morning. It's about a 20-minute drive to the venue. I had a prepaid parking pass. There's free parking at the venue, but there's a few houses that sell parking in their yards that are right across from the finish line and bike check-in for $20. And one, you could leave later because you can get right close to the venue if you do prepaid parking, except I just don't like dealing with crowds and I can't stand waiting in traffic. So I get up really early. And that's when I tend to eat or have breakfast. And I typically have a bonk breaker bar. I have drink coffee. And I try to take care of all my important business at the hotel before I go over to the race venue. And then when I get to the race venue and get stuff checked in, I just try to relax. Now, on Saturday, I checked in my bike. And I actually spent perhaps the longest time checking in gear and preparing my bike than I've ever done.
Really?
Just between checking my bike, going back to the car, adding nutrition, getting things set up. I was moving at a very casual pace, and I was more deliberate and double checking. 2 of the bikes that were next to me were not yet checked in. And so it always makes me a little bit nervous when you don't know if the athletes next to you are coming or not. And so I would find ways to come back and check to see if people were coming in, especially when I've seen some things posted about people tampering with bikes at the venues and whatnot. So I was pretty cautious. The next 2 bikes that were right next to me did come in, and they came in about 20 minutes before transition closed.
Gosh. I mean, why would somebody want to be that rushed?
I've seen a lot of people come in at the last minute. They're sleeping for, a long period of time. But since I get up early and I eat early and I use the bathroom and everything early, it's not a big deal for me just to sit in at the venue, had a little bit of a team tent, just chilled out, and just did things at my own casual pace to get my game face on and to get mentally ready.
Okay. Amount of PSI are you using for this?
Oh,
course?
PSI. I had between 90 and 95.
Okay.
And that's one of the things I'm glad I double checked. I almost didn't check my tire pressure in the morning. I had filled up my tires in the hotel room the night before, and I dropped off my bike. I didn't bring my pump with me to transition the first time. I went back, retrieved my pump, and went back into transition, and my tires were down in the 70s.
Wow.
And so, and I was shocked at how low they were considering I had just filled it, that night and had it in a hotel room. But so I'm glad I double checked, and I did it, between 90 and 95. And
now,
I have clinchers.
So what now?
I have clinchers. It's not a tubular.
Are you using latex tubes?
I am.
Okay, that's probably why then, because they're a little bit fragile, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whenever you get everything done with your transition area and leave that, you're going over, and are you putting on a swim skin for this race?
I did. This is the first time I ever swam with the swim skin in a race.
How'd it go for you?
Well, I was only about 30 seconds slower than last year, and last year the race was wetsuit legal.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good. I mean, all things considered. Now,
I can't.
Right. Whenever you get off in the water, how does the swim go for you?
So, this was a rolling start compared to last year being a wave start. And I'm cool with that because I'm a weaker swimmer and I don't like being swam over. I lined up. I had no idea how fast I was going to swim because I've only done one swim in a lake before that was non-wetsuit legal. And that was in Raleigh in 2016. And my time was like 59 minutes and it was not fast. I lined up between 43 and 46 minutes thinking that that might be where I'm at based on an open water swim I had done before. I got out in the water and from a mental, emotional fitness standpoint, this was the best swim I have ever had in a race in that I was moving forward. I was passing more people. I might have only been passed by a couple. I had confidence in the water that I've never before had. I was actually making contact with people, not intentionally, but I wasn't getting Charlie horses or cramping up. I just rolled with the punches, hit the turns, and I had so much energy just coming into the finish. I wasn't ready to die or be done. It was like I could have kept on going. And I know my swim fitness is getting better.
Wow, so that's almost like a perfect swim. I mean, if that was in the low 20s, it'd be the best swim ever. But
the thing is my form sucks and I'm really slow. So I'm still at 2 minutes, 20 seconds per 100. And so it's not that great because I don't have the form and I go out pretty relaxed. I'm not pushing it perhaps as hard as I could. But what I take from it is I've developed the confidence, or I'm getting that confidence where I'm comfortable in the water and I'm comfortable next to people, where maybe now the speed will come a little bit better because I'm not worried about cramping up or freaking out.
Right.
Which has been a big problem for me in the water. So I've got the confidence. Now I got to get the form and the speed.
Right. Did you have any trouble sighting at all?
Yes. Well, I should say yes and no. This was not a bad sighting course for me, but at Muncie, you go away from the boathouse. And when you make your second turn and come in towards the boathouse, the sun is up and the sun is pretty blinding. Last year, they had sailboats lined up along the return, and you could actually see the masts, the shadows of the masts of the sailboats, because you could not see the buoys. It was so bright. This year, for some reason, the sailboats were not in the same location. There were sailboats, but it tended to be more when you went out instead of when you came back. And when you go out, you can sight just fine. So when I came back, you couldn't always see. I happened to be mostly on a buoy line. And I got a glimpse a couple times of the boathouse. So I knew I was heading in the right direction. It's not a small reservoir. It's not a big reservoir of water. It's pretty small. So it's kind of hard to get lost.
Okay. Now, you get done with the swim, you head up to T1. How does the swim out to the time you get to on the bike go?
So it's about a quarter of a mile. The transition at Muncie, it's in one way and out the other. And that's the same for both the swim and the bike. So it's about a quarter of a mile into the transition area. You get to your bike, grab your bike, and off you go.
Okay. Now, you stripped off your swim skin. Did you have any trouble getting it off?
I have a hard time with the zipper. I managed to get the zipper. It was a nice long run. It was about a quarter of a mile to transition. So I eventually got the zipper off. But it's easier sometimes with the wetsuit zipper than the swim skin zipper.
Right, because it's smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So now then, you get out onto the bike ride. How did the first few miles go for you on the bike ride?
So the bike was great. Last year, the first couple miles were incredibly rough. They repaved the whole area. So the pavement is smooth. It is black. It is fast. It is fun. And so it's all smooth riding. The first few miles, you have 5 or 6 miles to go before you get to the highway. It's a closed course with 2 loops. So it's completely closed. They have really good officiating. It's not a draft fest like Texas was. They have, there were officials everywhere. And it's just a fast, fun, relatively flat bike on a very smooth surface.
Okay. Now, with this course, how deep are the wheels that you're using?
I have 60s.
Okay.
You want a disc. This is a course that you want a disc. I just don't have a disc.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, they're just outrageously priced and very expensive. So I also have the Reynolds Strikes, and I love them. Now, whenever you get to the bike, do you have a certain strategy that you want to execute for this bike ride, or of how you want to tackle it?
So, actually, this race for me, the whole goal was the bike. The goal was to hammer the bike. I wanted to break 2:30. Coach wanted me to break 2:28. Had 5 mile splits set up. The goal was for each 5 mile, try to get under 14 minutes and worry about hammering the bike. And we know that I'm capable of running, but I don't know. I've never really totally hammered it on the bike. So let's see what you can run after hammering it on the bike. Muncie has a difficult run. So, but you find true grit if you push yourself to the limits on the bike. I was not going to monitor power. All I was doing was monitoring speed. I was looking to be between 22, 23 miles an hour. And that was the goal. I didn't care about heart rate. I really didn't care about power. I had cadence on there because when I bike outside, my cadence is always a lot higher than it is when I bike inside. I don't know why. But I paid some attention to cadence. So if my cadence was getting up over 90, I would try to get to a harder gear just to crank it a little bit more as opposed to total spinning and just get more power by going to a harder gear.
Okay. So that makes sense. You were trying to basically go as hard as you could on the bike, and with a higher cadence, you didn't want to spin out so much. You wanted to actually push a harder gear if there was one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, with that said, what type of cassette are you using for this course?
So on the front, I had a 5439 Q rings, and on the rear, I used an 1123.
Okay. Wow. 1123. I use an 1128 because we do some hills down here, but 1123, that seems quite aggressive.
I swapped out. I had an 1128 and I took it off and put the 1123 on for this course. That's what I used last year at this course. It's the only course I've used that cassette on. But if I'm working on cadence as well and the small adjustments are all I want. So I don't have to drop cadence too much by getting into a harder gear.
Okay. Now, as far as the bike course goes, did you see a lot of flats on the bike?
No, I didn't. I didn't see a whole lot of people needing technical assistance. I think there were a couple. In general, this is a very nice bike course. Most people play by the rules and get over to the right lane pretty well. You don't have as much blocking here as you have in other locations.
Okay. Now, did you have good aid stations on this course, or were some of them better than others? What was that like?
Yes, it's so this is nice because you actually get 4 aid stations over the course of 56 miles. Because you have 2 aid stations on the loop and you do the loop twice.
Okay.
The handoffs were great. People were holding the water bottle on the palm of their hand so you could grab it and they weren't jerking and everything away. The bike aid stations were fabulous.
Okay. Do you feel like the bottles on the hands are the best way for the bottle exchanges on the bike ride?
So I think holding it on the palms is the best. I've had a bike crash before in an aid station and the person was holding the bottle up high. And what happens is the reflexes. I think that sometimes people can jerk or pull without realizing it. So when the bottle is on the palm and you grab it, it's all on me. There's no other factors. And so I think that's a much better way off.
That makes sense. So as far as the bike goes, is there anything you'd want somebody to know that hasn't done this bike course before?
There is a little bit there are a couple of hills. While it's pretty flat, it's not totally flat. The conditions are actually very good. The bike ends a little bit with an uphill. What I tell others though is a lot of people hammer the bike. The run is hot without shade and there's hills. And so if you are a person that struggles with the run, if you completely hammer the bike, you really might pay for it on the run.
That makes sense. Now, with the bike ride, was there anything that stuck out to you as far as something that was different on the course than last year, or is this the exact same course?
It's the same course. I was a lot stronger this year. I was fresher, and I didn't run out of energy at the end. You know, like I could have kept on going probably for another hour. I felt so better. And all I did, I looked at my speed and I paid attention to my breathing.
It seems like you're a lot better trained this year than you were last year.
I feel like I'm a lot fitter, and I've been doing a lot more high intensity work, and I'm becoming more familiar with what I'm capable of doing.
Okay.
I know, like, I looked briefly at my data. My average power this year was over 20 watts higher than it was last year. Almost a 13% improvement last year to this year on my watts for that course.
Wow.
And I don't weigh a whole heck of a lot. And so a little jump in watts goes a long way in speed.
For sure. Now, the last few miles of the bike ride, are you doing any type of transition to prepare for the run ahead?
I didn't. I just kept on biking like I did the whole time previously.
Okay. Did you do a flying dismount?
No, I just dismount a bike normally. I don't know. I'm not good at the high-tech stuff. I haven't practiced that.
So how did T2 go for you?
So T2 was a little bit slow. I took my bike shoes off and I had a little bit of cramp in my lower calves or lower area. My right cycling shoe was loose, where something probably came loose and I didn't know it when I was biking. I knew I needed some nutrition. I had a little cubed cooler underneath my bike. I was thinking about the run. I normally run with a handheld, and I was going to run this race with a Camelback. And so I had a cooler underneath my bike filled with ice that had a Camelback in it that was filled with ice. And so I took that extra time to put that Camelback on to run with the Camelback so I would have cold fluids for the run.
Okay.
So I couldn't put my socks on. I couldn't put my socks on worth a darn. I had a real hard time, and they were just short socks. I had powder, everything, and I couldn't get them on. So that was frustrating. But then once I got the socks on, I was okay and out to run.
Okay, so you took the extra few minutes or seconds to get that cold water, get your socks on, get ready for the run. And I would say you had a pretty good run at 149. I mean, that's pretty good.
I can't complain too much, but I know I'm capable of doing much better. I started out pretty fast. Now my goal was to monitor cadence, not to monitor speed, but to monitor cadence.
Okay.
And the goal was to have a cadence greater than 180. You know, hopefully start out, have a cadence about 184 and try to maintain to 180. I started out and I think my cadence was 186, 188, and just probably excited to get out on the run. And then I overcompensated and got down into like 174 and was down in the 170s. And the Muncie run course, it has hills. They're not nearly as bad as the hills where I live right now or train, but it's freshly paved blacktop without any shade. It was not a particular breezy day, just kind of stagnant, hot, humid air with hills and the sun beating down on you. And you start slowing down, and mentally your mind is like, damn, I got 13 miles to go or however many. And I was trying to do math somewhere between miles 2 and 3 where I was not a quarter done yet. I really had to work on self-talk.
Really?
And things did not turn around until I think I passed until about between mile 4 or 5. And as I got closer to mile 5, I started to see the light and like, okay, I got this. But I had my watch set at 2.5 minutes, 2.5 mile splits. And on my first 2.5 miles, I was sub 20 minutes, which is flying. I added another minute per mile or so to the second 2.5. So the first 2.5 miles, I was under 20 minutes. I was almost 22 minutes for the next 2.5 miles. And then that dropped with that cadence going down to 174. And somewhere in there, mentally, I had felt a little bit of breeze. I saw a tiny bit of shade in one spot and celebrated that little bit of shade and got my cadence up, and I started moving again. And as I got closer and closer to the turnaround point, it was like, I got this. And I had to talk to myself saying, you're always going to be faster running than you are going to be walking.
Right.
And the sooner you get done, the cooler it's going to be because it's only going to get hotter. And the further I ran and you started seeing other people walking, the more energy I ended up getting. Because as I saw other people walking or slowing down, it's like, oh, you can run. You need to keep on running and get your cadence up. And so I started seeing other people on the run course that I knew or recognized, and that gave me more energy. But I was in a low spot for a couple miles and really had to work on talking myself out of it and reminding myself that I'm capable of running and that I needed to run.
Right. It seems like you had to actually go back to your why and all of that because you had to realize why you're out there in the first place and what makes you want to do this sport. And having that negative self-talk come into the picture where you really didn't want to be there in that spot. How did you get through that?
Well, sometimes you compare to previous years, and this is one of those times where I've done the course before. And I think some of the negative part came last year. I was just so tired when I did a race. It was my third race it was my third half Ironman in 8 weeks. And you make mountains out of molehills. And when you have the hills, you tell yourself that it's worse than it is. And I'm focusing on cadence, and you start getting a couple flashbacks. And when you know that you're going slower than the year before and you have the heat, I have certain moments where I'm like, maybe this is the best I have today. Maybe this is all I got. And then you try to remember, I've worked with psychologists before, or sports psychologists, in terms of finding out turning points. And if you train yourself to think in this way, you remember the time where someone says, you just need to reel them in. And then you grab that piece of information and you start reeling it in. And so trying to focus and reflect the whole badass mantra for brave, athlete, strong, sexy, able, the whole badass mantra for me. When you start forgetting, it's coming back and thinking and going through, and then it helps knock you back into focus to try to get back on track.
Okay. Now, as far as the run course goes, how do you know how hard to push on the earlier stages versus the harder stages of the run?
I don't. I'm still learning, and I'm still figuring it out. On my run, I'm monitoring mostly cadence. I do have my heart rate on there. I'm paying attention to my breathing, and also, I'm really paying attention to my breathing. I am somebody who doesn't know how to deal with pain well. I always like to feel good. You have a lot of athletes who are really good at pushing themselves to the limit and pushing themselves into the medical tent. And for me, I haven't discovered that. I feel good, and if I don't feel good, I tend to back off, which is something that I need to work on a little bit. I mean, I want to feel good, but I need to work on and pushing what my limits are. And so I don't know as much about pacing that I could.
Now, if we take a step back and look at the bike ride, what was the nutrition plan for the bike ride?
So I had glycodurance packed. I had it in both my front aero bottle as well. I had one water bottle in my rear. I actually packed an extra water bottle that I had on the frame. I can hold 4 bottles. I ended up having 3. I almost used the extra bottle on my frame, but I knew it was going to be really hot. And I knew when it was really hot, I would need not only more fluids, but also more nutrition. So I thought it would be better to bring something extra and have it just in case. I ended up clearing through both of the bottles. So I ended up just with water at the end instead of using, my spare. On this race, I was much better positioned than I have been at previous races. I'm used to playing catch up since I'm not a strong swimmer, but I had several opportunities with a lot of white space in front of me, meaning that I wasn't constantly passing people. And that really helped me with nutrition because I'm a lot more comfortable reaching behind and grabbing water bottles when I'm not catching somebody so quickly.
That makes sense.
But and when I'm constantly passing people, I rely strictly on my aero bottle and I'm not refilling it, or I'm more likely to skip nutrition. Here, I was cruising and I was going quite fast. That it was the easiest passing pace lines I have ever had. And I was not even going nearly the speed of the people that were in front of me. The fast guys were faster swimmers and were already way ahead. And it was the easiest passing, the most confidence I've had on a bike, where I wasn't worried about, do I enter the draft zone? I just went.
Right.
And that really had a lot of energy with it.
Okay. With your nutrition plan, how many calories per hour were you aiming for?
You know what? I didn't have a good plan. I had mixed. So the night before, I mixed 2 water bottles with about 800 calories each. But the morning of the race, I ended up filling up water bottles with ice and transferring stuff that was in the fridge into the ice. So things were getting more diluted. And so I probably had about 2 water bottles that had maybe 500 calories in it and a couple water bottles with less than that. The more dense ones, I moved into my bike. So it's kind of confusing. It was not, I just put a whole shitload of calories in water bottles, cooled it down with ice, and whatever I had on my bike, I just tried to drink.
Okay.
That's a good plan.
Okay. If you think about how much calories you actually consumed on the bike, about how many calories did you get?
I have no idea. I would say between 800 and 1,000.
Okay. Over 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So around 350 to 400 an hour.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That might be an overestimate because I honestly don't know how many calories were in my water bottles. And I don't know how much splashed out.
Right. Because my thinking is you have a dark spot on the run. You've already said that. And it was only the earlier stages of the run. And from an outsider's point of view, you can take, okay, if you have a dark spot on the earlier stages of the run, it might be because of a lack of nutrition, a lack of caffeine, a lack of sodium on the bike ride. And if you could nail that down and say, okay, well, maybe you didn't have enough here, or you can just add a caffeine goo at the very backside of the bike ride, that might give you enough of a jump or jolt to get through the run without that little bit of a pain spot there. Does that make sense?
So, and I don't know, because physically, on the run, I felt very strong. On the run, I felt very strong. The dark spot was mental.
Okay.
The dark spot was very, very much mental. In my Camelback, I also had calories. I also had calories and salt. I'm going for calories more. So I think it was more mental than anything else.
Okay. That makes sense. So the later stages of the run, how does that go for you?
So, I got in my game. I just started running. I was not monitoring pace so much. The pace, I think, was all over the place. But as I'm coming home and I'm over halfway done, the run always gets easier once you cross the halfway point. For me, the run always gets easier once you cross the halfway point because I know I'm over halfway done. I'm coming back. I know that there's an uphill at the end. I'm seeing other people starting their loops and they all look upset, like, oh my gosh, they all look pretty much like the same place I did when I was at that point on the run.
Okay.
Just hot and ready to be done. But I had a couple friends from clubs that would see me and they'd shout out and say, oh my gosh, you're almost done. And then you'd get a jolt of energy and you just keep on going.
Okay. Now with the run course, how was the spectators on the course?
So this is an out and back course. There are not really a whole lot of spectators until you get to the finish. Most of the spectators are kind of right at where the aid stations are. The run aid stations, I'm going to say, are average. It was somewhat frustrating because things were not in the same order and they did not have the same offerings at each aid station.
Really?
So there was one aid station where all I wanted was Coke and they had no Coke. This time, the water in Gatorade, or I didn't have Gatorade, but the water was actually cold. The Coke was hot. And so once I got Coke and had hot Coke, I just spit it out like, get rid of this. Who wants hot Coke? Where previously I'm used to the Coke being chilled and the water being warm. One of the reasons I ran with the Camelback was because I wanted cold water and I ended up having ice until the turnaround point. So, I mean, I had so much fluid on the run just from the Camelback that I stayed pretty hydrated. And most of what I got from the aid station then was to pour on myself to stay cool.
Okay. So you went to Coke pretty early?
I hardly had a Coke. I don't know, it might have been the second or third aid station. I tried a Coke. It was warm. I spit it out. Somewhere around the turnaround or shortly thereafter, I tried another Coke. It was warm. I spit it out. I would say the one thing that was really unique about this course, there was an incident on the run. As I was coming out towards the turnaround. This is a closed course. a vehicle pulled out on the run course. And this was somewhere between miles 6 and 6.5 by the turnaround. The vehicle came out and was trying to leave. He saw there was a race coming on. He started coming in reverse and did a Y turn on the road. He started shouting explicatives at all the runners that he was going to take us down. I don't know. He was under some obvious distress. Now, I'm just running. I'm not stopping. Most of us are just running. And all the athletes are looking at each other like, what's going on? Is everything okay? I'm coming towards the turnaround point, and now he is coming in my direction, speeding. There's like volunteers running at the vehicle, trying to get it to stop. I am running on the midline on an out and back course to stay free of the lane. And I think what happened is he had an emergency or something at the hospital, and he was really freaking about how to get out so he could get to the hospital. But the aid state, there's an aid station at the turnaround point. So there are people and volunteers at both ends of the turnaround point. And there was somebody that had a camera that was going to get a picture of the license plate. And I don't know what happened because I was still racing. But, in my mind, being military and thinking about terrorist attacks, this was just a redneck that was frustrated. But you're thinking about, oh my gosh, is this some terrorist attack where someone's going to start plowing over all the runners with the vehicle?
Yes.
Because he was threatening and he was yelling and he was driving and he was speeding down the road when people were running. And it was like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on?
Wow. And I'm sure that raised your heart rate some and your anxiety levels at that point.
I was pretty calm.
Really?
Giving it all. You were a little bit scared. But my heart, I need to go look at that heart rate. I don't think my heart rate spiked. My heart rate was high the whole time. My heart rate was in the 180s the entire time. And so it didn't really spike up much higher. I also, there was an aid station, so I was walking and grabbing stuff through an aid station as well. But, it was for those of us that were in the area, it was, what the heck is going on? And I think they found a way to get this guy off the road and to get him out, but it was ugly.
Wow. So the last 800 yards of the run, how was that for you?
So Muncie is the course that never ends. Muncie ends on an uphill. It ends on a downhill, but you come up a hill on the pavement where you're getting towards the start and you feel like you're getting close to the finish. Once you get to the top, you turn off the course onto the grass. And when you turn onto the grass, the finisher chute just winds. And so you can't see the finish line almost until you get there.
Wow.
I did not know this last year. This year I was prepared for it. And so, I was in a good spot coming up that hill. I had a teammate out there, like, come on, get up and over. And then you have the tri-club tents when you're coming down the grass into the finisher chute. I had folks trying to hand me bourbon as I was crossing the finish line. And I was prepared, that it was going to be a little while. You have to watch your footing because it's a little weird being on grass after you've been on pavement. You could twist an ankle if you're not careful or paying attention to the terrain.
Okay. Now, after you crossed the finish line, what'd you do next?
I went and grabbed that bourbon.
Wow.
I went through the finisher chute. A volunteer there poured an ice cold water all over me. Yeah, and I think really the guy who's going to hand it to me when I crossed came and found me and handed me the bourbon. So I sat down and drank the bourbon.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, looking back at it, how was your recovery process?
So my recovery, that day I sat down a bit. I ate right away. I actually got an appetite quite quickly. I took off my wet gear and I changed. Muncie is nice because they have shower facilities down at the boathouse. And for athletes, if you wanted to shower, it's free. So if you wanted to go, you could shower after the race at the venue without going to a hotel room and drive home later. But it's a big club tent area. So you have all kinds of people with tents and coolers. Some people are grilling out. It's the best post-race food out of any 70.3 venue. They grill chicken. They have coleslaw, potatoes. It's fabulous. So I hang out, eat food, celebrate with the different clubs, just chill and have fun. I stayed an extra night. A lot of people go home that same day. I stayed an extra night in Muncie. And I drove home Sunday. And then when I got home, I did an hour-and-a-half spin and spent some time in Normatec boots.
Okay. Now,
just took it really.
I actually talked to Rachel McBride, who just completed Frankfurt, and she also mentioned that the showers were at the finish line. it seems like Ironman might be getting some wits about them and bringing showers to the finish line.
No, this isn't something that's brought. There's actually a fixed facility at the venue. And
okay.
it's a park at Prairie Creek Reservoir, and they have shower facilities at the park. And for athletes, they allow athletes to come in and use them. Spectators or others can pay to come use facilities, but the athletes can go in for free.
Wow, that's pretty nice. Now, if you could change one thing about the race and do it all over again, what would you change?
On here, I may have went even harder.
Okay, so you feel like you left some on the table.
I do. Maybe not on the run. I would have started a swim earlier. Now, I'm not the strongest swimmer, but one thing, when it gets hot, and it gets hot quickly, the sooner you start the swim, the sooner you get on the bike course, and the sooner you can go. I didn't realize how horrible my aero position is. I know I have a bad position on the bike, but I'm not optimized on my bike. I don't have, there's some equipment that if I'm going to go out and hammer a bike, I feel like I left a lot on the table. My bike was very good. My bike was very consistent. I was very controlled. I wasn't hurting at the end, so maybe I didn't push hard enough. The run, I wasn't paying attention to overall time or overall pace time. And I didn't get myself to the point where I was really hurting. Not that I want to hurt, but that 5-hour mark is getting closer and closer.
Right. I feel like you'll be able to break the 5-hour mark pretty soon.
So there's no reason why I can't break that 5-hour mark. And even with the bad swim, I think I'm capable of breaking a 5-hour mark, even though I need to improve on the swim.
So what you're saying is you want to do Chattanooga 70.3 next year?
I don't know what I'm going to be able to do next year with my new jobs, but my goal is Super Frog. Everything is actually, I'm signed up for Arizona. I'm hoping I can still race, but everything for me is lined up for Super Frog next year. I'll be in the 40 to 49-year-old age category, and I give it a 10-year age category because Super Frog has slots for active duty military to qualify for Kona. And so my goal is to go to Super Frog, qualify for Kona, but I need to be a much stronger swimmer because of the ocean swim. That run is supposed to be very tough because you're running on a lot of sand. And so literally everything I do between now and then is focused on improvement or understanding certain parts, understanding myself, understanding my body, so I can put it all on the line when it comes to Super Frog next year.
Wow. I was looking at the date of when Arizona was.
Mm-hmm.
I got my little calendar right here. So what's something that you learned about this race that you'd like to pass on to someone who hasn't done this race before?
I think this race is a really good beginner race.
Really?
I think it's an excellent race for people beginner for people that want to come to the 70.3 distance. It's a single transition race, which makes it easier for logistics. The bike course is nice because it's 2 loops and it's not technical. It's a comfortable bike. And while the run is hot and the run is tough, you end up in a really great venue. The after party is simply amazing. And most of the course is closed. Unless you have freakish people in cars coming on it, which is unusual, most of the course is closed. And so you're able to focus on just doing your race. And you have to be less worried about traffic. You don't have to worry about turns. You don't have to worry about where you're going. And because of that, if you're looking at a longer distance race, this is a really good place to start.
Okay. Now, for first-timers that are going to do this race, what advice would you give them?
So I would say definitely I would come early. I would come early on Friday when you're able to check in, so you can get a chance to see a little bit of the area. Get the parking across the street. Pay the $20 for parking and park close.
Okay.
Because it's a closed course in certain times. At some locations, you're not able to leave until after a certain time. But it's worth getting parking across the street and paying the $20 and supporting the economy. If you have spectators and stuff, it's not the most spectator-friendly course, but they can bring a grill and they can start grilling out, and it's a beautiful park at the end.
Okay. Now, we covered a lot. Do you have anything else you'd like to add about your race?
I think it was a good race. I PR'd, so I'm very happy with it. It was a day where not a lot of people PR'd because it was pretty hot. But, I'm not satisfied. I think it's the third race in a row where I've been first off the podium.
Wow.
And so I'm ready to make it on the damn podium.
Well, good. I know it's going to be pretty soon. Hopefully at Arizona. Oh, gosh. So if you think of how Ironman could have made this race better, how could they make it even better for you, you think?
Well, this year there was no ice cream. Having the ice cream after the race would make it a lot better.
Really?
Last year there was ice cream. I think that they do a phenomenal job. This was the 39th year that this race has been going on. Next year will be the 40th year. That tells you something. It's the second longest running event for the 70.3 distance. And that tells you something. I don't know if it's Super Frog. I'm not sure if it's Super Frog or not. I do know that this is the second oldest, and next year is the 40th year. And when you have that much support from the community to keep an event going like this, it tells you it's a good race and it's a good venue. And so they've done an outstanding job. I saw all kinds of officials as well. I mean, it felt really good to have a good officiating presence. And the athletes are amazing. The Midwest crowd is fabulous. There are some strong and fast people coming from the Midwest. You might not think of Muncie as a destination place, but the local people, the community, the tri clubs, you can go and you can have a great time.
Wow. Well, I have a few more questions for you. So what race is on your bucket list besides Kona?
Super Frog.
Okay, besides Super Frog, like other races that we haven't even talked about.
Right now I don't have a whole lot. I don't have other races that are really on the bucket list right now. I think getting to New Zealand would be great and racing in New Zealand. But I got to work on the short-term stuff before I start looking at the long-term or other destination. Focus first.
Right. So I know you're doing Arizona and Super Frog next year. What else is next for you?
Well, I'm moving. I'm heading to North Carolina next week. So that's a big thing. This was a race literally the weekend before I pack up, load up, and leave. So there was that going. I'll probably be doing some local stuff in the North Carolina area.
Where in North Carolina are you going?
I'll be in Sanford, so I'll be between Raleigh and Fayetteville, so central North Carolina. I'll be running the Army 10 miler in October. I'm trying to make the Fort Bragg team. I'm not quite old enough to be a master, so I'm trying to compete against 21 and 22-year-old women who all they do is run.
Wow.
So trying to make a team with a bunch of youngins that are runners as a triathlete. So that should be good.
Wow. So how can athletes follow you?
So I'm on Instagram at Anastasia Piotrowski. I'm on Facebook, Anastasia Piotrowski. That's my maiden name, Piotrowski. If you're looking me up in any Ironman race results, it's MCKAY McKay, but I like to be sneaky that way.
Okay. Now, being that I already know what your definition of a perfect race is, I'd like to ask you something a little bit different now.
Okay.
Being this is the last question, it's always a fun question to ask people that are on their second time on the show. Now, if you could put together the perfect race venue for you with the ideal race course to include weather conditions, what would that be for you?
So I would be a downstream, I'd be a downriver swim. Beach to Battleship might be pretty good because then you have salt water and a protected environment with a tidal current that all brings you in. So if you make yourself like a Frito bag, wetsuit mandatory, so you have to wear your wetsuit just to get a little bit more speed. Anything to help you in the water is great. I think I'm good with a lot of biking stuff. I'm not sure if I'm best with hills or flat. Muncie was really encouraging with the flat area. I did very, very well, but I'm a little person. And so I can pretty much tear up hills pretty well, that I think I would probably benefit from a hillier course as opposed to a flatter course. I hate wind, so let's, ditch the wind. Cool weather, of course, cool is always better than hotter, but I can handle heat provided we don't have much humidity. On the run, if I'm a half Ironman, I want a cooler temperature. At least with an Ironman, it cools down by the time you get to the run a little bit. But I think rolling hills, nothing too steep. I do not do well on I can't say that. I can do fine on flat courses, but I think I do better compared to the competition when I have some hills, because I'm used to training with hills, and I think hills help me focus on my running form. I just don't want hills in the bright open sun on open blacktop where you feel the heat and everything coming.
Gotcha. Well, that's really awesome, really different kind of perspective, kind of like a mix of a few different races. It's always fun to hear that. Well, Anastasia, I've really enjoyed hearing about your race experience, and I look forward to following you at Ironman Arizona. I'd love to have you back on after that.
Oh, it sounds like a plan.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you have a good time in North Carolina.
I hope so. It should be fun. I'm going to be jumping on a perfectly good airplane, so hopefully I don't get hurt.
Awesome. Have fun for me.
I will. Take care.
All right, have a good day. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.